Hey everybody, welcome aboard. Short and simple, I returned my Oculus Quest 2, and I sort of wanted to go over why and a few other things to kind of help people make a decision, I guess. To give a bit of a backstory, I pre-ordered or put in an order for Valve Index in August, and I believe I have about a week left before that ships. So in the meantime, I thought, let me see if I can spend, a little less with the Oculus Quest 2, or quite a bit less rather, and get a pretty good experience. And unfortunately, that's not exactly what happened. So I hadn't played in a long time, so I was sort of interested in getting into VR because it's something I've always been really curious about, and the experiences I've had with it thus far had been really good, so I was on board for the idea, but I sort of wanted to wait it before I shelled out that kind of money for something as, I don't want to say frivolous, but not as like mandatory as, say, a graphics card or GPU, stuff like that. I'm going to start off with pricing for obvious reasons. The Oculus Quest 2 is really appealing because it's only $299, which is not a bad entry for this. It's the cheapest headset that you can do VR with, as opposed to, say, the Reverb, which is around $600, HTC Vive Pro, which is like $1,400, I think, for a complete package, and then the Index, which is $1,000. And then you have Pimax, some other stuff like that, but those are all kind of hit or miss, and not as easy to get a hold of anyway. So yeah, at $299, it's super appealing. And a lot of people have mentioned this already, but I'm just going to bring it up for virtue of my point here, I guess. But the $299 is really very baseline. Like, that is as simple as you can get it. And I found the comfortability at that price point to not be great. And I know a lot of people, YouTubers and stuff like that, have mentioned that you need the Elite strap to really get the full experience out of the thing, which I think is true, but I also found that to not be super comfortable either. And again, this could all be based on my head shape and stuff like that, so I want to clear up that this may not be the experience you had. I'm only giving you the experience that I've had. So I didn't find that to be very comfortable. I tried it a bunch of different ways and couldn't quite get it to fit right either. And then I went to the base strap and tried it because I honestly never did. As soon as people mention this, and all the YouTubers and influencers and stuff are like, you have to get the Elite head strap, that's mandatory. My guess with that is, and not to discredit any of them, they all have their systems and the way that things are working, but a lot of these people got preview Oculuses and review units and stuff sent to them ahead of time, and accessories and all that stuff that they obviously didn't pay for because that stuff was sent to them way before the actual release date, or at least somewhat before the release date. And that's not to say that they were paid to say something or any of that. I obviously have no idea what their deals were, but I do find it a bit odd that it was something that was like mandatory for them, because I imagine they're going to make their money on the accessories, not quite the headset itself, and it's sort of by design that way. So it's sort of twofold, right? Like, maybe they're being told to say this and or request it. It could also be their exact opinion, because I do think, generally speaking, the Elite strap is more comfortable. And I will say, overall, I don't think either of them are that good. I didn't try the one with the battery strap that sort of adds like a counterweight. It was just too expensive, and I really didn't plan to play the thing too much untethered. I primarily got it for the proposition of PCVR. So I ended up returning that stuff. There's also been a ton of people discussing that their Elite strap isn't snapping or breaking. At that point, I still have the ability to return it. I'd rather be safe than sorry and save the $50. What I did was save that $50 and put it towards the HTC Vive Deluxe audio strap and some adapters to make that work. That was by far the most comfortable overall, but it still wasn't great. Definitely balanced it out a little bit better because it was slightly heavier. It also, the way that it cups was more secure. It definitely felt like I was putting on a helmet as opposed to like a strap. Like, it felt more like a unit. I did have issues with that specific HTC Vive audio strap, and I also saw some people mentioning at other places that they had the same thing, but my left headphone specifically on that wouldn't clamp down. And whereas the audio does sound much better than the included stuff, it's not like worlds different. I would say, like, if you were to buy that as just a pair of $100 headphones, you'd be pretty disappointed, I would think. But as the package, it makes sense. And I learned a lot of it sort of boiled down to the facial interface. So with that, I picked up the FitPack 2, I think. I'd pretty much gotten the whole list of accessories from the beginning. I got Elite strap, FitPack, which had the light blockers with it, and then the link cable as well. The FitPack, I found the wide interface seemed to work best because I have glasses, and without them I'm legally blind, so I have to use them. I found first problem with all that is the light blockers that attached to the lenses ended up just jabbing into my glasses, so then it added a weird pressure, and then you also ran the risk of scratching my glasses and stuff like that, so I ended up taking those off. But yeah, the FitPack, so the wide interface worked well. The problem with all of those, though, is they still all use the same foam that the stock one does, and I found it to be really scratchy, and it would also leave impressions on my face most of the time for being clamped in there. I had also ordered initially the VR cover for it that was in stock at the time. Upon ordering it, I believe I received an email, I think 2 days ago, saying that they're not sending them out for quite a while. They've had some issues with them, and I have seen on Reddit as well that a lot of people that got those originally have had the ink from, or whatever dye is being used in the padding, saturate on their face, and they've had to scrub it off pretty intensely. There's also the concern of it maybe being toxic, stuff like that. I imagine that that's not an issue, but if you have very sensitive skin, stuff like that, that could be a problem. That may change the whole feeling of the headset, but I do really doubt it. And so with that, the last sort of piece to this whole thing is I don't quite understand why they decided to go the route of the 3 segmented IPD settings. Because no other headset does that. Like, the software side didn't seem to be that bad. I hadn't used that, but the people that have used it said nothing really bad about it. It seemed like that stuff worked pretty well. And then the traditional slider, which was already on the original one, I imagine they have a manufacturing process for that, so I can't imagine it's vastly different. But instead they decided to go with this system. To be clear, I could see out of every one of them, to some extent, there was a sweet spot in each of them, which I thought was kind of strange. I don't know if that's by virtue of where I had it resting or what the case was on that, but I could see out of all of them. I did find the tightest one to still be the clearest, though the second stage was still pretty clear mostly. And honestly, it sort of shifted between the two. Like, some games I would see better in the first, some games I would see better in the second. But I think that also has to do with something that I'll bring up here in a moment. Yeah, with that, I just don't know why. It's a weird omission. There's also no eye relief or distance slider either. So, especially as a glasses wearer, you would see a pretty substantial ring, which just doesn't really add to the whole experience. Like, it sort of takes you out of it. I always felt like I was playing a game and I was wearing a gimmick. I never felt like immersed in the idea of virtual reality the way that you would probably want to, or at the very least, like the way that the promise of this technology is, being immersed in a world and stuff like that. And I just never really felt it. With that too, the controllers are also pretty slippery. They feel really good, I'll give them that. Like, they do feel pretty comfortable overall. I will say I did find some issues with tracking. That could also be due to the lighting in the room, but as you can see, it's like relatively bright, and this is just with the overhead light on. And there's no thing on the filter or anything like that, so it seems bright enough. And I've heard that if they're playing it in direct sunlight or outside, it's too bright, so this seemed like a good in-between, but I definitely had some tracking issues. All this could be down to the unit. I also did find some pretty severe haloing in the bottom of the lenses, and that could be by virtue of me wearing glasses. It could be by virtue of the IPD adjustment. Could be the screen on this specific one. It could be a lot of different things. Like, it's really hard to say. With all that, I found the comfortability to be the biggest downfall to this thing. It was sort of, I could either have okay visuals and still be able to see, but the headset would be really uncomfortable after maybe like 10 to 20 minutes, or I could have it very comfortable, but I couldn't really see anything, thus causing like motion sickness and all that. So effectively, my end time, generally speaking, was maybe 20 minutes. Like, it was always like 20 to 30 minutes at most. I believe my Steam VR setup was around 30 hours or so that I had tried to run through this thing and really make it work and do the best that I could to get it to just be right. I think some more of that comes down to the functionality and the stuff that is pitched but not exactly there. The big sell of this thing is the resolution. It's 1832 by 1920 pixel per eye, which it's one single LCD screen, so it is not quite the same as the others that have like per eye and all that, or two panels per eye. This is just one full panel, which I think is where the IPD stuff comes in as well. Because even if you do switch it between the two, the software doesn't recognize that that's happening, so it just we'll couple it to whatever the last one was, and then tweak it like slightly. The resolution is good in Quest Home, but everywhere else it's not great. And again, this could be user error, but as far as I know, they haven't unlocked that. So the resolution and the refresh rate are both tied to the original Quest's 1400 or 1440 by 1600, and then at 72 hertz, as opposed to the 1832 and the 90 hertz that was pitch. I guess effectively you sort of think of it as like I bought a new monitor, but the monitor is, you know, pitched at this and only runs at 60 hertz where the box says 144 hertz. This is what this thing does. And then on launch day it was like, actually no it doesn't, and we have to update the software to do all this, which is something that you should think of ahead of time. Like maybe they're more waiting on like people aren't going to buy it right now and they're going to do it at Christmas, like make it a gift, whatever. So they sort of decided we don't need to do this just yet. But it is strange. It doesn't seem quite right. You can enable 90 hertz in the Oculus Home, which does, you know, it works well. It's pretty smooth, and the visual clarity is definitely better. Get into the actual software and functionality of the thing, this is where the problems sort of start to arise more so, if you can set aside the comfortability. So it's getting into Steam VR, which is what you would want to do. First off, with the way this is set up, you kind of need a more powerful machine than you would need if you had like just a standard HMD head-mounted display. Due to the fact that it is compressing everything and then sending it through the cable, whereas instead of just sending it as a straight shot. I found performance even on a 2080 Ti to be pretty hit or miss, and I think it also has to do with the fact that it's sort of layering software on top of itself. So to give you an example, like you start Oculus Home, then you have to enable the Rift Link beta, which is still not finished, which I find odd because the Rift is now discontinued. So and I know sometime next year they said they're going to be wrapping up the Quest and Link together to one thing, which is maybe the time to tackle this. So then after that, then you launch into Steam VR and launch your game. So you're already kind of layering software a couple times over, and then you're also not really utilizing the power of the actual chip inside the headset. And then you're also still locked at 72 hertz. Then you're also stuck at the refresh or the resolution that the headset is at currently, which is at the Quest 1 level. You can kind of tinker with that inside Steam VR to do that, but then that further impacts performance. You can also side quest it to enable the 90 hertz, but that doesn't work for everything. And it's just a lot. You can also play Vive port games, but that's another layer. You have to launch that through Steam VR. Some games you can kind of launch outside of it and it'll load up, but not always. And it's just a weird setup of like, that's 4 programs you're opening to then get to a game, which the idea of the Oculus Quest is sort of convenience, right? Like the idea that you can just put it on, play a game, whatever, which if you're doing it wirelessly, you totally can do that. But the problem with that is you have to buy everything from the Quest store or load it from SideQuest. They say at some point they will be enabling this. There's supposed to be an update in November, which this video is coming out in November, so maybe I jumped the gun and in a few days they'll have that there. But that's sort of the issue that I'll tap to when I go back to price real quick, because all said and done, trying to get this thing comfortable and get all the functionality out of it and get it to work and everything like that, it's $299 for the headset. It was $100 for the deluxe audio strap. It was $20 for an adapter. It was $80 for the cable because the link cable from them has the best bandwidth. It's a fiber cable. It works way better, and I believe it's just much more put together than what's there already. So at that point I was closing in, and I also bought some grip covers. So at that point I'm closing in at around $600. So at that point, out of the box, the HP Reverb is already kind of better in the sense of it's going to have the screen resolution is going to be better. It's already going to be tethered to the computer, so you're going to cut out the middleman for that. The biggest issue, and I haven't seen too many people say too many bad things about it, but the tracking is the thing that you're probably going to be the most concerned about, just because it's done with Windows Mixed Reality. It is still 6 degrees of freedom and inside-out tracking, but the difference being that their track record with it hasn't been great. That's not to say that this one couldn't change all that, but it's just a sort of unseen quantity at the moment. We just don't quite know. The other major point I guess I have to make about the Oculus system is going to be the Oculus storefront, and then the way that sort of Facebook is handling distribution of games and other stuff of that nature. If you look at it objectively, right, the Oculus Quest is going to be it's a console. It's a head-mounted display. at its core, but more or less it is a console. It has its own storage, its own peripherals, its own storefront, its own exclusives. It's a console. For the state of VR where it's at, I don't think that's a great system. I know that, you can obviously play stuff from Steam VR, but I've already mentioned some of the issues with that, and that experience is not great. And VR is still, as widespread as it is, it's still pretty early in its infancy as far as actual the platforms go and the games themselves and stuff. We just still don't have too many like full experiences or enough to say that we should be segregating it further. I think VR, especially if it's going to really take off, it needs to be open, and I think that's the idea that Valve is sort of pushing for, and it's sort of a reason why I've decided to send this back also. I think when I look at this more as for VR as a whole, I think that the way that Facebook sets up their storefront, I don't think is helpful to VR progressing forward overall. I think mainly because a lot of people have said this on the Reddit forums and stuff like that, is they really do have a walled garden. You can't really get in there without using one of their peripherals, or if you use Revive, but that could be cut off at any moment because it's not proprietary to them. Someone else developing this software on their own. And I mean, the person could stop developing it at any point because that's just what they decide to do, or Oculus could just say, nope, we don't want that anymore, and that's it. In addition to that, a lot of people have noted that like buying certain games for the Rift platform don't cross over to the Quest, so you have to buy them again. So you can still play them if you're mounted to that, but if there is a mobile version or the Quest version of the game, even though it's exactly the same game, it just runs on that platform, the controllers, everything is the same, you still have to buy it again. I know Arizona Sunshine was a notable one. It's just really unnecessary. I mean, you're making, and it's not new to the game industry, right? Like you own, they do, you have a PlayStation 3 and it's like, oh, okay, well, I want this game on this new system, so instead of doing backwards compatibility, I have to buy the game all over again. And I totally understand that. The difference, I guess, being here is like most of the people that are getting into VR to start with are generally going to be PC folks. I mean, that's where it started. That's where it's best. And so when you look at that, it's basically saying like, think of it this way. Like if I were to buy a new graphics card, that's the equivalent of going, all right, well, now that you bought that new graphics card, you need to rebuy your entire Steam library, which has never been the case for PC gaming. That's never been the thing. You may have had to buy a card to actually run the game, but you never had to buy the game again because of a hardware change. That's really foreign to us, and I don't think it's something that we need brought into the ecosystem that we have already. And I will say, in addition to that, with the way the industry has been moving recently, you've gotten more crossplay, you've got more cross saves, you've gotten more, like PlayStation exclusives are even starting to trickle over to the PC, and that's the healthiest thing for gaming as a whole, is everyone being able to play something wherever they want. There's console wars, and those are probably going to rage on forever. But when you look at the specs of these things, it's like, with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, I think is how they're calling it, they're effectively the same box. It's just, one has like a slightly larger hard drive, but, maybe the PlayStation 1 just has the, its software already installed in the OS and all that, so that's the 825 on that one, and then, Xbox is like, it's a gig, but, maybe it doesn't account for the operating system, all that, whatever, but the specs of them are nearly identical. So at a point, you're just like, well, which controller do I like? And at that point, it's like, oh, and then you get into exclusives. I mean, that's the main pull of these things. But you even see Microsoft going the route of like, hey, if you buy our Game Pass, which is, again, that's a whole different discussion, and that's really what they're trying to sell at this point is Game Pass, not exclusives or their system anymore. It's really Game Pass is the thing they want you to buy. And it's a great platform. Like, for what is there on offer and the pricing for all of that, it is bar none the best deal in gaming, and they advertise it as that, but I feel like that's accurate. The Vive port, I mean, some of those games are not, they're hit or miss, but there is still that option of like, I just want to spend this little amount and play that. And I think for VR, it makes a lot of sense to do something like that, just because a lot of the experiences are very short and sweet, and it's not to say that they're not worth the price of entry, but they're not the long-standing experience that most regular games are. A lot of them are, again, just like leaderboard shooting gallery stuff. Even still, the solid experiences are coming out of, Half-Life Alyx. That's a big one from Steam side. I'm sure they're going to continue to develop stuff there. and then you get the Oculus exclusives, which you can play with Revive and all that, but it just they're sort of forcing you into a setup you don't want to with an inferior product. Not to say that the Oculus Quest isn't good, but personally, like, it's just inferior, like, as far as the feeling and the way that it plays and the specs and everything. It's a great piece of hardware, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that, like, the Valve Index, for what it is, it's just a better product. Like, and there's, you know, and the price dictates that. So by doing that, it's like, here's $1,000 for this great piece of hardware being crippled by the fact that you can't natively, without some workaround, play games that are on only a inferior system. And now that they've moved away from, you know, their PC exclusive VR headsets and just straight to the mobile platform with the Link. And again, since we haven't seen Link yet, we don't know how well it will work once it's out of beta. But as it sits, it's just a bad prospect. You're just basically saying, hey, here's this cheap introduction that you need to spend a ton of money to then actually get to feel right to you, and then but you can play the good games, you know, more or less, or the good experiences that you can't get elsewhere. And also now you have to give up all of your personal information, which is just, I don't know, it's just not, I don't think it's great. And a lot of people that I think are going to get this, you know, be kids or whatever, is another weird thing. Because if you buy this headset, say, you know, for a 14-year-old or 15-year-old, you have to force them to get a Facebook to then use the product, I think is really weird. Probably some system to where it's like you can use the parent's account or something like that. But that's also really strange. Because you're sort of, I don't know, it's just something very unsettling about it. You know what I mean? It's not that it's necessarily going to be used for malicious purposes, but it just doesn't seem like the right way to do this. You can't even use an alias, you know what I mean? Like, you can't even set up like a different name or a gamer tag or whatever, and that's just I think not right. Like, I just don't think it's the right way to do this, especially at the vein of saving money, because it really seems like, yes, you get this for cheaper, but we're going to take your personal information and do with it what we choose. And that's kind of egregious. It's something that shouldn't be forced. And that's the other thing, is when you go back to the games and stuff, and you know, you've spent a large amount of money on their other platforms. Say you owned an Oculus Rift or a Rift S or the CV1 or whatever, and now you're having to rebuy your library again just because they've decided to cancel their stuff and then do this again. On other platforms, we're not totally like devoid of it, but the thing is like, you're not getting a really remastered version, or you're not getting a better product out of it. And especially at this point, a lot of those experiences don't even, you know, use the up-res of it or the refresh rate or whatever. So you're sort of forcing people again into an inferior ecosystem or product. And it's not to say the Steam VR doesn't have its issues, but you're sort of making people make a bad choice because you want them there, I guess. And I just don't think for VR in its stage that it's in, that this is healthy practice or the way that we should be, you know, promoting the system or to, again, make it the bog standard for VR going forward, is like, you need your own storefront, you need exclusivity, you can't let any other, you know, platform really mesh well with it or whatever. You need everything to feel less worthwhile on here than on, you know, if you were to use another product or whatever. And it's like, it's the same thing I've always wondered with Sony. It's like, Sony doesn't even really make the money on the hardware side, so why are they not allowing us to buy their games somewhere else? Because that's where the profits seem to come in, I think. I mean, again, I could be completely wrong on this, but it seems like that's the case. And same with Oculus. It's like, if you're taking all these headsets at a loss just to get them on your platform, like, why not give a good storefront or interface for all of VR and make money there? Like, you know, even if you compare it to, say, like Epic's game store, and this is the argument that I'll try to make a lot of times with Steam. It's like, I totally am with giving developers more money for the work that they do. That being said, Steam's platform is just so much better as far as the storefront goes. I mean, one, it has a cart that's still not present after 2 years on there, which is crazy. But like achievements and friends stuff, and even when it comes down to reviews, like they've recently started filtering in Metacritic reviews and other stuff like that. But some of that stuff, like for Horizon, when it came to PC, the Metacritic stuff was all for Horizon's console release, and they're two different things. Like the PC release had a plethora of issues to start with, and would have been should have been noted, and should have been people able to see, like, oh hey, there's a lot of issues with this game right now, maybe wait a minute. And this is, I'm getting a bit off topic, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the Oculus storefront is not bad, and it works as intended. It's just that it doesn't really make sense for us to not be able to fully use it for all these things, to push VR forward as a whole, and just be whatever is most comfortable for you, because they're not making the most comfortable and accessible and high profile headset available, and it just doesn't make the, like, I personally, and if you've had a great experience, that's totally fine. I personally had a really bad experience, and like these things, it was not fun to play this thing, and that could be by my vision or my head shape or my eye width or whatever. But you're cutting all this stuff back to push this thing forward by giving an inferior product to everyone, and I just don't think that's the right thing to do without other options, and then not letting you have them. It's just, I think it's just bad. I think it's just a bad practice. So there's that, and I've fully cut my ability to ever receive anything from Oculus, but that is that. So in conclusion, guys, I just want to sort of say, like, I don't think the Oculus Quest 2 is a bad setup. Like, I don't think it's a bad thing. If you don't have the financial means to get Index or Reverb or something like that, and you just really want to see VR, it is a good experience with a lot of caveats. But I will say, if you can afford something else, and you again are looking at PCVR, I think that's the way to go. Like, I've heard people say that it's a good side companion to that, and I wouldn't disagree. Especially if you had people over, for example, you could say, hey, use my Quest in that room. I'll use my Index or whatever, the computer. We could both play at the same house. It's like a two-player thing close together. That's cool. There's a lot of good benefits to this setup. It's just, I don't think they're handling it well, and I don't think the product is made as well as it should be, and I think that there's some seedy stuff that just doesn't feel right, and as a whole, I don't think it's great for VR. But obviously everyone's entitled to their opinion. That's just mine. This obviously isn't sponsored by anyone or anything like that. I'm a very small channel, and I'm just a guy that bought one, and this is my opinion of some of that stuff. So if you stuck around, thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe, do all that business. If you have anything you'd like to see me cover, talk about, please let me know in the comments and all that. And if you totally disagree, that's, leave that there too. I'm totally open to any information, because I don't know all of it. And yeah, I'm just a person. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.